Hey, good day. Welcome to the People's Loctivist YouTube channel. I am Sabelus Banda, the People's Loctivist. Today, we're looking at an interesting topic. Interesting not in a funny way, but interesting in as far as it addresses what we have to now ask ourselves as regards the rights of parents, children, and the state. We're going to break this down into 3 episodes, whereby for this particular episode, what we're looking at is the topic, your child, your responsibility, clash of parents' right and state power. The core issue is premised upon the regulations that have been put out for public comment by the Minister of Primary and Basic Education. The Minister has issued out what is referred to as the Admission of Learners to Public Schools Regulations, which is notice number 3415 of 2025, which appears in Government Gazette 53119, published on 6 August 2025. And the public has until the 5th of September to participate in that particular process, which is the commentary process. As we look into that, we will address that particular aspect of the commentary in episode 15 particularly. But as a premise, I would like us to look at some fundamental questions that need to be attended to and answered. The core question really is, who decides what is best for your child? Is it you, the parent, or is it the state? This episode lays a foundation for the tension that has been created between the parents and the state as regards particularly medical choice and the state's regulatory powers. We will develop what exactly we're talking about, especially when we get into the second episode, which will give us a full breakdown of the part of the regulations that is most problematic, especially when it comes to choice. Firstly, let's look at the constitutional framework. What does the Constitution say about this subject that has now put us in a position where we are juxtaposing the parents' rights against the powers of the state? Are we witnessing a pending wilting of rights of parents over decisions affecting their children, and witnessing a potential rise in the overreach of the state in as far as the rights of people are concerned? Let's look at section 28(1)(b) of the Constitution, which clearly spells it out, that every child has a right to parental care. And the right to parental care, yes, it might have some limitations where there is a necessity to limit, especially where the parents are clearly failing in their responsibility as parents, and then the state has a right to step in. But let's have a normal situation here. Let's have a normal scenario where the parents are fully equipped to look after their children in every manner possible that needs them to be able to take care of their children and provide the necessary parental care that they are capable of giving. We see that Section 29 of the Constitution further goes on to talk about the right to basic education. This is also something that we'll be problematizing as we go along, whether these regulations are in keeping with this part of the Constitution or not as well. And then Section 12(2) of the Constitution talks to the right to bodily and psychological integrity, which includes, amongst other things, the right not to be subjected to medical or scientific experiments without informed consent. And indeed, informed consent is not confined to issues of experimentation. Informed consent goes on to speak to issues of any medical intervention that is deemed necessary or advisable to a particular individual. We will also be dealing with that as we go along. So now we see that in terms of the regulations, the minister definitely does have the right to pass regulations. But it's also important to realize that these regulations must be in line with a particular purpose. Section 61 of the South African Schools Act clearly empowers the minister to be able to pass regulations. But those regulations that the minister is empowered to act are supposed to facilitate for the ensuring of access to education, not restricting education. So as we go into the next episodes, one of the things that we'll be asking ourselves again is whether through these regulations, the minister has gone over her powers, or is the minister within her powers in as far as these particular regulations are concerned. More particularly when it goes to issues pertaining to immunization as a condition to enter public schooling. This has to be looked at, this conditionality. We will develop it further. It has to be looked at in terms of, as well, the National Health Act, particularly Section 6, where Section 6 clearly specifies that before providing a health service, a health provider must inform the user. In this particular instance, the user is the child who is supposed to be immunized. But because we are dealing with minor children, then the consent has to be through the parent, as a minor child cannot be deemed to consent to medical intervention without the parent or an authorized guardian. So now, what does it say? It says that the parent, the user, must be informed of the diagnostic and treatment options available. We will check as we go along. Once we get to the section, which is episode 2, where we will be looking into the actual provisions of the regulations, which is section 14 of the regulations, whether there is any such provision. They have to be told about the benefits, the risks, the costs, and the consequences of such medical intervention. Do we have it in the regulations? We will see. When we get to the regulations, we will see the extent to which the regulations are actually aligned to the Constitution and also to the National Health Act. They must be informed, so the National Health Act says, of their right to refuse treatment and implications of refusal. So here, we are looking at a situation where we are talking about informed choice and therefore informed consent. You cannot be deemed to consent if the choice is only one, and therefore be said to have been informed, because you can't make a choice. It becomes informed consent because you have the ability to choose. Yes, I consent to go this particular route because I know the alternative that is available, and I am not happy with the alternative, so I will go with what is offered. And in that case, the informed consent is yes. And then You can decide, I'm not happy with what I'm hearing. On the contrary, I want to go this other route. I'm not going to take what is on offer. I will take this other route instead. And in that particular instance, by use of your legally protected and constitutionally protected choice, you say no. And you have a right to say no. No one can stand in the way of your ability to say no. So the other thing as well, the National Health Act clearly says that these provisions, this information that is being supplied by the provider to the user must be communicated in a language that is accessible to the user. It must be communicated in a language that the user will be able to relate to and fully appreciate the implications of everything that is being communicated to them. And the user has to be in a position where they fully understand what they are signing on to. So now, we are caught in a situation where through these regulations, effectively what government is saying to us is that as parents, children can be denied entry into school simply because they have not been immunized. So there lies the tension. There lies the clash between the parent and the state. Who has the right to decide what is best interest of the child? Is it the school or is it the parent? When has immunization ever become lawful without the informed parental consent? Without the parent consenting, there is no valid immunization which can stand the scrutiny of the law. That is a criminal act, and that is open to civil liability as well. So here we find ourselves in a situation where the state has decided that it will take a decision for every parent. We will look at the exemptions that are covered in the Act when we get to episode 2 and see if those exemptions that the state has put across really make any sense or not, and whether they help to minimize or address this clash that has clearly been created between the state and the parents. And it's up to you as parents to decide what the final point will be in as far as this clash is concerned. Because the basic collision points that we have to think around and see how we come to a conclusion on is where the regulations are concerned. There is the point of collision. The regulations are basically saying no vaccination, no school. How does that relate to the Constitution? How does that relate to the Schools Act? How does that relate to the obligation placed by statute on the parent to ensure that their child is at school? So on one hand, you place an obligation on a parent to put their child at school. On the other hand, you are saying, parent, even if you do bring your child to school, if they don't come to a point where that child has been immunized under duress, then your child cannot come to school. So we look at the Constitution. There is another point of collision where the Constitution clearly says that education is a right that cannot be denied. It's a right that is guaranteed to every child. It's a right that, by virtue of it being guaranteed, places a direct obligation on the parent to ensure that their child is schooled. But then here comes the Minister of Basic Education and says, even if that's what the Constitution says, I am saying, so says the Minister, if your child is not vaccinated, out of school or no school at all, save for the exemptions which we will look at. And it's up to you, the viewers, it's up to you, the parents, to decide whether these exemptions really make any sense or not, whether they are practical or not. Then we have the National Health Act. There goes another serious point of collision, where the National Health Act basically gives us the grounds upon which to enjoy the right to informed choice, the right to informed consent. But here comes the minister and says that regardless of the Constitution, regardless of the National Health Act, regardless of the South African Schools Act, my regulations, so says the minister, will determine that you comply as a parent, or we will punish you together with your child by denying your child education. So, as we close our first episode and think around our issues for the second episode, the questions that we need to keep uppermost in our minds is, under what circumstances can the state use access to education to override medical consent? What has to happen for the state to override medical consent by blocking the ability of a child to access the classroom? Or is there a way of the law protecting both rights equally? Or maybe, is there a way that the parents can stay within the law in as far as having their children in class and not be compelled to be subject to these proposed regulations? Parents, I speak directly to you. And I say, the responsibility is yours. The answer to the last question particularly rests upon you. It is upon each and every South African parent, grandparent, auntie, uncle, whatever, legal guardian, to answer the question as to how are we going to respond in as far as these regulations are concerned. We've got until the 5th of September. They were published on the 6th of August. 5 September is the deadline for filing of the comments and responses. In episode 3, we'll be talking more about the actual filing process, how to go about it, what to address, so that your comments actually find meaningful expression in as far as this particular agenda is concerned. I look forward to having you again in episode 2, whereby in episode 2, we'll still continue with the theme, your child, your responsibility. But then now, we go on further. Your child, your responsibility, inside the no jab, no school regulations. We are now going inside the regulations in episode number 2, where we see exactly what is happening in these regulations. So, my brothers and sisters, thank you so much for tuning in again and keeping up with the People's Loctivist. Remember, be the best that you were created to be. And remember, like, subscribe, press that notification bell so that you don't miss any future episodes. And definitely share this message. Let everyone who needs to know receive this message, because it's absolutely critical that as parents, when you are confronted with the issues pertaining to the law, you need to know what laws are on your side. It's not just a question of regulations and everyone now has to succumb. You need to know which laws are on your side and how to effectively use those laws. Thank you so much. See you in episode number 2. Goodbye.